This is Professor Raymond Noby, Department of Ancient History, log entry number 2. I believe I have made a significant find in the castle of Cantor. Having journeyed there with my wife Henrietta, my daughter Annie, and Associate Professor Ed Gettle. It was in the rear chamber of the castle. We stumbled upon something remarkable.
Astro Radio Z.
Once again, you ask the same shit you ask every week. But I'll indulge you, you creepy English tart. I'm here for my weekly stash of Teddy Mags, my favorite choco bar in the whole wide world, Toblerone, and my lotto tickets. Who bought a shingle? I have one!
Welcome to another episode of Astro Radio Z. I am your host, Derrick Carey, and on this episode, you're going to hear from a couple of the directors of the Witchcraft films. We were lucky enough to get Ron Ford, who directed Part 11, to record us a little bit, explaining his thoughts and feelings and experiences through making that film. And then I had a huge interview last night with Brad Sykes, the director of Part 12. And he's very candid. It's a great interview. So hopefully you guys really dig this. It was really fun getting a hold of these guys and actually hearing from somebody that made this stuff. Just a little side note, the audio on the Brad Sykes interview, the recorder I was using for some reason for the first half of the interview was beeping at us just very arbitrarily and periodically. So I've edited most of it out, but there's a couple of them left in there because it obscured some stuff that Brad was saying, and I wanted to keep that stuff in there. So please, when you hear that, that's what's going on. I'm not trying to censor Brad in any way. So here we go. First person you're going to hear is Ron Ford. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode.
All right, I came involved in the Witchcraft series because I had made some films for Jerry Pfeiffer of, what was the name of the company? Vista Street Entertainment. He had this project to make, which was had Korean investors, and they wanted to do a total ripoff of the Terminator with a lot of sex and nudity in it, called Turburator, in which they planned to use actual effects from Terminator, and they just needed the dramatic scenes to cut in with that. So Jerry set me up to direct that. I told him I would direct this thing, which required new girls on set every day. I had absolutely no budget. It was a nightmare. The script was awful, and I had these Korean investors breathing down my neck. He said, if you could pull off this, I told him I wanted to do a witchcraft movie, and I wanted to do it in film. Everything I'd made before that was on digital video. So he said I could have that project if I succeeded with this Turburator thing. And I did. I got it done. We had beautiful girls, new ones on set every day. I scrambled my ass trying to get that thing done. It was just a putrid script. I hated it. I used a fake name on it, Matt Cobb, because it had a rape scene in it, and the girl goes back to the guy for more afterwards because she's so, she was so enamored of the strong male man who came in and took her. It was really an offensive, disgusting project, and so I didn't use my name. I did it. I probably should be ashamed of myself, but I did make this frickin' thing, and I got the job to do Witchcraft. Jerry himself used all the footage we shot and made 2 different movies out of them. One of them was called Red Light Stalker. None of them made any sense. Anyway, so I got the job doing Witchcraft 11. I was not a fan of the series, and it seemed like most of them were about vampires rather than witches. So I wanted to go back to Witchcraft and do something that had a little more elegant storytelling than just being all over the place and just about sex and different effects. So, with my theatrical background, I came up with the idea to set it in the drama department, that these girls would be drama students being manipulated by a Satanist drama instructor. So we somewhat paralleled the Macbeth story to a very slight degree, very loosely. But it has that underpinning, has a Shakespearean underpinning, and the story was at least, had a beginning, middle, and an end, and through line and stuff. I did have nudity requirements. Jerry wanted what he called a love scene every 15 minutes, which means softcore sex with lots of boobs. So we did that, put that in there, and the story just stops dead at every one of those scenes. But that's the nature of this series. That's what I had to deliver. Let's see, what else? I had a lot of freedom. Jerry he thought it was neat that it had Shakespeare underpinnings, but I wanted to call it Witchcraft 11, The Weird Sisters, which is, what the three witches are called in Macbeth. He didn't understand. He said, that's just dumb, weird sisters. We're going to call it Sisters in Blood. So I gave it this really generic title. But anyway, otherwise I had quite a bit of freedom. He came in at one point, said I had to shoot this scene where the instructor is taking pictures of the girls topless for a poster for this college play. And I was like, well, it doesn't really make any sense. There's nothing in the script to set that up. So how do they know that's what he's shooting? And don't you think it would be kind of against the college rules for the instructor to be taking nude photos of his students? But anyway, Jerry just came into the studio when we were shooting and said, we're stopping what we're doing right now. We were in the middle of doing something else, and we're going to shoot this photography scene. So we did. And, as I thought, it didn't make any sense in the movie, but there it is. We also went for a whole lot more gore. Jerry wasn't real comfortable with that, but, I wanted to make a horror movie. So we did. We had some pretty extreme gore in it, and he left it all in. That was to his credit, I thought. Our effects guy, Steve something, I can't remember his last name. He was a sweet kid. He was like 19 or 20, and he just had really imaginative shit. He just threw things together with what he had and very little expense and made these really impressive looking effects and witch creatures, which he played the ghosty witches in several scenes himself. Very, very sad. Before we'd even finished cutting the film, he committed suicide. They found him his mother found him in his closet, hanging. And that was devastating. So we dedicated the film to him. If you look at the end of the credits, there's his name. What else? I didn't have any say in the editing. There are a couple of shots in there where you can see boom shadows and stuff like that. I had taken alternate takes, but the editor couldn't be bothered to find the right takes and do it properly. And I wasn't allowed in the editing room for some reason. I wanted to have a bigger part in the movie. I like to think of myself as an actor, but Jerry just goes, "No, you're not an actor. You're a director." So I was relegated to being an extra, one of the forensic guys in one of the scenes. You asked if I was obligated to use Lutz and Garner, and yes, I was. I was happy to do that because McCool and Stephanie were both pretty good friends of mine. And they were a lot of fun to work with, always. Everybody on the cast was a lot of fun. So there was a nudity quota. Budget, you asked about, I'm not exactly sure what the final budget was. I think it was about $40,000. It was pretty cheap for what we did. I think it looks pretty good for all of that. The creature at the end, I had wanted a stop motion creature, just because stop motion is cool. Jeff Leroy did one for me, but we didn't have the money and time to do it properly. It didn't look real good, which is no slam on Jeff. He did the best he could with the time and the budget. So what happened, this Steve guy who did our effects, whose last name I still can't remember, he just threw something together and we shot it. I laid on the ground and shot it using the sky as a blue screen. And we worked terrific, I thought. So that's it. That's my take on Witchcraft 11, and I hope some of this is useful for you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just, hopefully it doesn't go over something super important about Witchcraft 12.
Hopefully not. There are many, many important things to say about this film, let me tell you. I actually watched it for the first time in probably 10 years last night. In preparation for this, my poor wife had to sit through it with me. She was there when we were filming some of it, and she remembered certain things. It was good for me. It kind of jogged my memory a bit about it. You know, I figured I might as well look at it again.
How did it treat you rewatching it?
You know, I actually didn't hate it as much as I thought I would, because when we were making it, all I could think about was how compromised the production was. Mm-hmm. And I was also comparing it to the previous film, which it was a bigger movie than, they had more money on the Part 11 than they did on mine. Mm-hmm. And I was around when they were shooting Part 11. I was pretty aware of it. I knew pretty much all the cast and crew. So I was sort of comparing it to that. Unfavorably.
I mean, what was the big thing? Because I know Ron shot his installment on film. Was there a reason why you preferred to shoot it, or was it just a budgetary reason why you guys shot it on tape? It
was definitely a budgetary thing. I mean, because I think I have not seen all the Witchcraft movies. I'll admit to that right now. But most of them were shot on film. And a couple of them were shot on video, though. There were a couple that were done in England, I think, that were shot on video. And Ron's was on film, and they just, by the time they got to Part 12, the budget just wasn't there for it. So we would have liked to have shot on film, but the executive producer was not interested in ponying up the money for that. So
I'm guessing you're referring to Jerry Pfeiffer?
Yes.
And what was your relationship with him, and how'd you get involved with the Witchcraft series?
Boy, the first movie I directed for Vista Street, which was his company, was called Babes in the Woods. It was a kind of like erotic comedy with cheerleaders, getting lost in the woods. And anyway, that was the first movie I did for them, and I was brought in by this producer who I was working with at the time, and he brought me in, and Jerry approved. I had directed a few movies before that, and Jerry was fine with Babes. So we did Babes, and then I did another movie called Mad Jack the same year. Actually, I directed it like a month or a month and a half after Babes, which was an independent film where I basically brought some financing together from out of state with Vista Street as like a partner. So we did that movie, and then about a year or two later, I did this movie called Lord of the Vampires, another co-production. It was a out-of-state investor matched with Jerry coming in as like a completion fund kind of thing. And then, like a year later, I think, we did Witchcraft 12. So I had done 3 movies. I wrote and directed 3 movies for Vista Street prior to directing Witchcraft 12.
What was David Sterling's role in this production?
Yeah, good question. That's the question I keep asking myself, even today. No, I mean, look, to be fair about it, I mean, he had a relationship with Vista Street before I ever came into the picture, and he would do movies for them, here and there, and he would usually bring directors in, and Jerry would have to approve them or whatever, and that was, like I said, he'd done a few things for them. So, Witchcraft 11, he did that one. So he had a relationship with them as a producer, and by the time of Witchcraft 12, Jerry also, I had a relationship with Jerry as a director, because the films that I did, Mad Jack and Lord of the Vampires, I mean, Dave has a credit on Mad Jack, but, he really didn't have anything to do with that movie in terms of the financing of the production, and the Lord of the Vampires, he was not involved at all. So I sort of have my own, I guess you could say, with Vista Street by that point.
The Witchcraft films obviously have a set formula through most of them. Were you given any rules, content-wise, as to what had to be in these films?
There was and there wasn't. I'll be very honest. I mean, I think the only things I really remember being told, like when they said, we're going to make this movie and we want you to write and direct it, was they wanted, in terms of the story, they wanted this character, Will Spanner, who is like a warlock that has appeared in the other films, I guess. I don't know if he's in all of the films, but he's in some of the other films, I guess. And that was the only thing character-wise or story-wise I had to respect. And then I think that there had to be a certain number of sex scenes in the movie. That was sort of a prerequisite for almost any Vista Street film, no matter what the genre was. So those were the only things. And then apart from that, no, they did not really say. Jerry didn't really say, you got to have this, you got to have that. It was really just the character Will Spanner had to be there, and that was about it. So I was pretty much free to create my own storyline and my own cult that I created, the snake cult that I created, all the other supporting characters and all that stuff. I mean, because I've seen a few of them. Like I saw the first one and the second one, and I saw those like when they were kind of new, like when they were new on video. And in fact, I even had this is kind of funny, like when I was a teenager, I had a poster for Witchcraft 2 on my wall.
That's funny. It seems like the Witchcraft films predicated on that cover art in order to sell themselves.
Especially with look, it was just a random thing because I was, in high school and I was collecting movie posters from video stores, like a lot of people in my generation, and that was one of the ones that I got, from the local video store, and I put it up on the wall. But, that I know, however many years later I'd be directing one of these movies. They'd be 12 of them, for gosh sake. There'd be 10 more after that one,
Right. He had to be making a lot of money and profiting on these films to keep cranking them out year to year.
For sure. I think he was. And what's interesting is that, the original, and you probably know this anyway, but a lot of the first 5 or 6 or 7 of them were distributed by other people. I mean, Vista Street they were a distributor as well as a production company, but they didn't start distributing the Witchcraft movies till like, I don't know, part 9 or 10 or something like that.
Right.
So they were all handled by outside distributors, but yes, I'm sure they were making money on them and they were getting out there as they hit the video boom with those films and they established that brand, that they created. But then at the same time, what I would hear from people was that they're all different. Every film was like a new movie,
Well, yeah. The story, there was no real storyline that went through any of them.
There was no continuity almost. So when I did, like I said, when I did part 12, or started to sit down to write part 12, I didn't feel like, I had this, I had to bring a bunch of characters or create storyline that was established in part 1 and had been going for 12 movies. I mean, and honestly, if you look at a lot of the franchises, even some of the bigger franchises like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, obviously they go off on all kinds of tangents and send Jason into space and things like that. That they get to that point and they're not making sense anymore. They're just coming up with new scenarios. So for me, it was kind of liberating, honestly, to not have to like stick to a whole ton of specific guidelines or characters. And I think a lot of them were shot in Los Angeles. That's one thing they have in common. I think they were, except for the ones that were shot in the UK, all shot in L.A. So I share, my film does share that with the other films.
Now, speaking of something that your movie doesn't share with the rest of the series, let's talk about the cop characters Lutz and Garner. Now, was it a conscious decision that you decided you weren't going to carry on with those characters?
I will tell you that I was aware of those characters, and I asked Jerry if I could drop them. Because, to me it was just one more way to kind of like free myself from having to repeat the things we've seen before. When I was writing that movie, I was really thinking of noir movies. I was thinking of crime films. I was thinking of movies like, Michael Mann movies and William Friedkin films. I know that sounds incredibly pretentious, and you compare the Witchcraft 12, but that was my mindset. I was like, I want to do a noir movie, a detective movie, a crime film, an L.A. crime film that just happens to be a witchcraft, and that could actually be retitled, and it wouldn't even matter. So I did drop those characters because I felt like I asked Jerry if he cared, and he didn't care. He didn't mind, and so we dropped him. The Will Spanner was the only one that had to be there, and that didn't bother me. That was actually like, okay, he has to have a male lead, and he's kind of an interesting character. Everyone thinks he's a normal guy, but he's got these powers, and you don't find out till later that he's got this stuff. I mean, I sort of approach the whole movie as if you haven't seen the other films, because I think a lot of people when they rent these movies, they don't rent them in order, you know, and they might, you know, they're not in sequential order, and they might just pick it up because it looks interesting. They like the box, or they see it online, and, you know, whatever, they download it, and it just looks like, you know, something they want to see. You know, I just want to create a new storyline.
You know, there's 12 of these at this point by the time you came on, and I think, you know, let's be honest, they're TNA films, so I don't think that the vast majority of the audience were really renting them for an in-depth story.
No, I hope they weren't. I mean, you know, I hope they weren't expecting that or continuity. You know, but that said, no, you're right about that, and I wouldn't disagree. But that said, I did try to do something with it that, you know, because I'd done a few movies for Vista Street at that point, and you know, some of them were more my movies and some of them were more Jerry's movies, and this was definitely more one of Jerry's movies. But I was like, well, okay, it's Jerry's movie, it's a Witchcraft movie, but, you know, I'm going to try to make it as good as it can be with what we have to work with, you know.
I really liked that for once, and out of 12 films, you have this Will Spanner character that's this warlock, but he never utilizes his powers. They keep, like, every single last movie, this guy, the evil bad guy, will say something to the effect of, oh, this Will Spanner guy, he's very impressive. But all they do is, like, then fight each other like a fist fight in some broom closet or something like that. So
they talk about it, yeah.
Yeah, they talk about it. And he never does anything.
Like I said, maybe it's a good thing. You know, sometimes directors say this and it annoys people, it angers fans and stuff, like when someone does a remake of a famous horror film and they say, I've never saw the original or whatever, and it pisses everybody off. But, I mean, I have to be honest and say that, you know, I was not a huge fan of this series, and I was aware of them, and I had seen a few of them. I remember the first one being almost like a Rosemary's Baby type.
Absolutely.
Okay, see, I remember that, and the second one, yeah, this is kind of funny. I didn't see the part 2. I had the poster on my wall. I didn't see part 2 till I started writing Babes in the Woods, because actually I was house sitting for a friend of mine when I was writing Babes, and he had Witchcraft 2. He had the DVD, and I was like, oh, I guess I better watch this to see what kind of production situation I'm getting myself into with these people. And it's kind of ironic because honestly, they probably they had more money on Witchcraft 2 than we did on Babes. But it was a pretty small scale movie, and I remember there were times where people were falling out of a window or something. And
right.
And there was some lighting toward the end. I think she was a temptress or whatever, you know, Witchcraft 2, the temptress, and she's got some crazy lighting effects going on behind her. But I don't really remember a lot in the way of special effects, action, anything like that.
No.
And then that was where I stopped, you know. Like I said, besides being aware of the others and then being privy to the part 11, you know, I wasn't on the set, but I was very aware of the movie. Let's just put it that way. I just tried to do something that, you know, that I thought was entertaining. And yeah, as far as Will using his powers, I mean, I wasn't really aware that he had or hadn't used them before. I just figured if he's a warlock, why would he use his powers toward
right? You figure it would be a given.
Well, I guess nobody else was interested in doing that. I mean, I like I said, I was like, I just don't even. And you know, it's also funny. You'll appreciate this because this interview is about Witchcraft 12 after all. When I was scouting a location for Babes in the Woods, we went to a house where they were shooting an adult film while we were there scouting, and there was a guy there who not connected with the adult movie that was shooting, but another guy. I don't know what he was doing there. Maybe he was looking at the house. And we started talking to him, and it turned out he directed other Witchcraft movies. Do
you remember which one it was?
I think his name was like Talon Sue or something. I think he did like part 5 or part 6. That's what I think it was.
It must have been part 5, because I forget her name. It was a female that directed part 6.
Oh, probably Julie Davis.
Yes.
Probably Julie Davis. Yeah, there's been a couple of Witchcraft alumni who have gone on to do some interesting, other interesting movies, let's just say. But yeah, Julie Davis. Yeah, she did one. I never saw hers, and that you know, I mean, on some level, it'd probably be interesting to see it just because you know it's directed by a woman, and she did go on to do other like kind of like personal like kind of comedies, I guess.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of. I mean, these movies are for a lot of people they were one of their first movies to start their career. For me, it was not. definitely not one of my first movies, and not my last either. It was kind of like somewhere in the middle.
Well, you were kind of like a hired gun on a lot of the movies you were doing at that time.
Well, yes and no. I mean, when you have a lot of films, a pretty big output of films around a certain time, a lot of people assume that you're just grinding them out like sausages. And for every movie that I directed that was like a work for hire, there were other films that I had been working to get made over a little while, over a period of time. Some of them were like spec scripts that I pushed through on distributors who I'd done other movies for, and they're all kind of different situations behind these movies. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Witchcraft 12 was definitely a situation where I was not asked to do a part 11. To be honest with you,
What was the reason behind that?
Well, the reason was that Ron Ford. I mean, it all kind of depends on who's around and who's in with who at the time. I mean, and this is not a knock on him at all. He's made a bunch of movies too. He was just doing more stuff at the time. He was in business more with Jerry and with Dave, and I guess they just felt more comfortable having him do it. I had only directed a couple of movies at that time, so I was more probably just being arrogant. But it's not like I went around and said this to people, but I was definitely personally thinking I could have directed that movie. Well, I did get to direct the 12th one, so I sort of got my wish, but yeah, so I didn't have the resume to direct it at that point. I don't think he'd done anything for Vista Street. I think he did some things later for them, but he didn't do anything. I don't think he'd done anything prior to that for them. I think he had done some other movies for this other producer. 3 or 4 of those.
Sure.
And he had done. God, I don't remember what was around that time, but anyway, he was working. There were definitely things happening, and there were all these little movies, and
right.
Just next thing you know, he's directing Witchcraft. Maybe he was just as surprised to get the offer as I was to get part 12. You're just doing your thing, and then all of a sudden you get a call and say, we want you to do the next Witchcraft movie. So
we had kind of talked before about how it seemed like Ron had got a pretty decent budget. He shot on film. He had some pretty decent special effects with makeup effects and prosthetics and stuff like that. And then it sounded like you kind of got a little bit of the shaft on it. Do you know what the approximate budget was for your film?
It was very low, and I wasn't told. I mean, you're never really told these things. I mean, I've
right.
a few movies where I've found out, and almost like by chance, but I didn't. I wasn't told the budget. I mean, what I was paid was actually pretty fair, and I thought it was fair for the time for me. And I didn't really ask about the rest of it. But it's funny you mentioned the special effects in part 11, because the guy who did those was someone he was a friend of mine who he literally got the job because of stuff he was doing with me at the time. Yeah, his name was Steve Warren, and he did the effects on a movie I directed called Evil Sister 2, which were extremely impressive for what little we had. I mean, he really went the extra mile, and anyway, he did a wonderful job. People liked what he did. Ron saw it, Dave saw it, and they brought him onto Witchcraft 11. And I remember him being pretty like scared, because he was like, "Oh my God, I have to do effects on this thing now, and it's a bigger budget." But he did a good job, and people liked what he did, and so anyway, that's how the effects came about on Witchcraft 11.
Yeah, they were definitely the best up to that point.
Well, he did a wonderful job on that. Sort of a trivia note, but he also played the clown in the original Camp Blood.
That's right, I had heard that.
For those who, and he did effects on that movie too. So those who care about that type of trivia, the same guy, But I didn't feel like I got the shaft. I mean, I would have, sure, I would have been nice to have been shot on film, but. Jerry, it's amazing how things can change rapidly in this business sometimes. And, I think that by the time they had done, I don't know what they spent on part 11, but I mean, it was also still a very low budget. By the time we got around to ours, Jerry just, he just wasn't getting enough DVDs out there to justify spending, let's say, I don't want to say $100,000, let's say $50,000, I don't know what they had on part 11, but it was very low budget 16 millimeter film. You know, yeah. By the time they got to mine, we're shooting on video, and I was pretty much told that right off the bat. So.
Well, did you feel that budget when it came to, like, because there was a few scenes in the film where it felt like you were kind of lacking some of the money to be able to produce extras for certain scenes?
You know, that's exactly what I was thinking last night.
Because there's like the funeral scene and then the crime scene where the coroner's on the scene and there's no...
Well, the coroner, you know, the funeral scene, I think that came out pretty well because we just stole that. I mean, we just walked into a cemetery and just shot it. I was watching it last night with my wife. She's like, you guys were pretty ballsy. You just walked right in and did that. And I'm like, yeah, we did. And we had an actor dressed as a priest and everything, and we just did the scene, and nobody came and kicked us out or anything, which in L.A. is pretty...
shocking, huh?
And then the coroner scene, I know what you're talking about. That didn't really bother me, although I've done scenes like that in other films where I had more money and you usually want to have people milling around and witnesses and all that kind of stuff. But the scenes that bother me in terms of the lack of extras are actually the club scenes, whether in the club and then, of course, you know, there's this footage that is not from my movie that's in the movie.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because there's definitely two separate sources, film and then the video. Did you actually film club scenes? We didn't. I mean, the stuff that you see that with the girls that's shot on film. I mean, not only is it shot on film, it was probably shot 20 years before we did our movie. It was very dated material that, you know, I don't know where it came from. And I'll state right now that, you know, I had no involvement in the editing on this movie at all. Wow. Never
shown a cut of any kind. And it was passed on to the editor who also shot it, and they edited it without my involvement, and that's one of the reasons why I have reservations about the movie. But those scenes that you're talking about, those were put in, I don't know whose idea that was. I mean, I know Jerry and I know Jeff, and it could have been either of them. But the footage was probably from another Jerry movie.
Sure. Well, yours isn't the first movie that they did that with in this series. There's a couple of them. Number 9 was like that.
It's a mentality that Vista Street had that I had to push very hard on. I mean, it didn't happen on Babes in the Woods or Mad Jack, but it did happen on Lord of the Vampires, and that really shouldn't have happened because that was a co-production, and, you know, with an outside investor, a majority outside investor, not major stuff, but, you know, establishing shots and just things that I didn't shoot those things, and I don't want them in my film. And so, you know, when I finally saw the movie, I think I went down to Vista Street's office to meet with Jerry about something, and he's like, oh, by the way, your movie's done, and, you know, here's a screener cassette, you know, and so I took it home and watched, and it's horrifying, you know, and you watch it and you're like, you know, it's not like the movie's just editorially atrocious from start to finish, but those shots, you know, it's like I was, you know, we were talking about last night, I was basically, what would have been nice is if we could have just had extras there and we could have just opened up those scenes more. And then we would have... Yeah. I mean, look, if we had, let's say, one more day and a little bit more money to pay the girls, we could have got even, if you want to have stripping or you want to have something like that going on, which wasn't supposed to be a strip club, but anyway, you know, it wasn't. I mean, I didn't write it as a strip club. It was just a club. It was like a bar.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, no, I didn't write it that way at all. And they turned it into a strip club in Pose, a strip club from 1992. You know, looking at the girls, I mean, look at the girls' underwear, you know, and it's like these fashions are outdated, you know.
Right, and their hair is still kind of poofy.
Oh, the hair, they got the frizzy hair, they got the curls, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, it's ridiculous. And also what's even more ridiculous is that not only is that footage not from my film, it's repeated. Like, it's, you know, it's like, how much more insulting can this be, you know, to do that. But look, I will tell you, when I made this movie, I had made 3 movies for this. I knew what kind of company they were, and I knew what kind of movies they made, and I knew how they treated directors, I knew how they treated movies in post. So I wasn't really shocked, you know, I didn't have an epileptic fit when I saw this. I just was like, okay, that's what I figured you guys would probably do with that. You know? It didn't really blow my mind, but But it's also one of the reasons I hadn't watched the movie in 10 years.
It had to hurt you when you start watching, all of a sudden there's this atrocious-looking title card that pops up on the screen.
Oh, man. Well, okay.
It's rough.
If you want to go there, yeah, rough. Yeah, exactly. It is rough. And if you want to go there, it's one of these movies, and this happens a lot with low budget sometimes. It's almost like everything that we shot is, I think, passable. It's a lot of times what these guys did to it in post. They just totally screwed this thing. And I would include in that the footage from other films. I would include the title cards. I would include the visual effects. I would include the music score, which I hate. All of the above, because this is what happens when directors are left out of the process, and some people come in and they just do whatever they think is best. And it's not even about money here. I'll be honest with you, because there are a lot of talented people living in Los Angeles, all this stuff.
Yeah.
The people who made this movie, who produced this movie, didn't care to find those people. They just got the easiest, cheapest, whatever, and, they just let them loose on it. So yeah, that's the thing. Now, the title card, I don't like the title card. I don't like the fonts. I don't like the music. I hate that music. And I am a filmmaker who is extremely music-oriented. I mean, I've been told by composers I have bigger soundtrack collections than a lot of composers do. I love film music.
What makes your movie? I mean, you should care about that kind of thing.
You should, but some people don't. And one of the things that, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but what I think happened with Witchcraft, is that the music was probably what you call library music.
Of course.
It was not composed, and I've had that happen on a number of movies that, once again, I was not involved in the post, and that's what happened. But the films that I'm really happy with, that I stand behind as a director, are the ones that, one of the things that the reasons I stand behind them is because I've been able to get a composer involved and work with them and do a score. To me, that's just like so. It's so important. So that's one of the things I really don't like about the movie. And not only is the music bland, it's just like there's no themes, there's no anything. It's just kind of like whatever they felt like dropping in at the moment. It's almost like a blind man was pushing buttons like track 2, track 7. Just drop it in. So it's kind of. That's some aspect of it I find very unforgivable. And then the mix, too. If we're talking about post.
Oh, wow. The sound is pretty rough in some spots.
Yeah, and you know what's funny, though? It's like the sound recording itself was probably never the best. But by ladling that music over at a higher level, you're struggling to hear the dialogue sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that really bothered me about it, needless to say. So it's all these things in post that, literally and that was the last movie I made for Vista, by the way. It was like Lord of the Vampires. I fought real hard to preserve something that ended up basically getting ruined in post. And so by the time I got to this movie, it was more like, I'm going to do this movie, I'm going to direct it, I'm going to be professional about it, but I'm not going to be surprised if they wreck it in the editing. And and they did.
That's got to be so disheartening because myself, I'm an editor by trade. That's what I do. So when I watch these kind of movies or watch any movie in general, I'm always looking straight to the post and looking at the edit, how it plays, all the different factors. And there's a few of these scenes where you can just tell that, if it were given a little care, that they would have played a little bit better. Like there's that one sequence where Will ends up, they are on like a stakeout where he's trying to catch the girls, doing their thing. And there's a standoff where the girl has a board where she's trying to ward him off. And
I know exactly what that was painful. I said this to my wife last night. We were watching this. I said, that was painful to shoot. And she's like, why? And I said, because the girl couldn't do the action.
She wasn't selling it.
She couldn't sell it, and it was like, I don't want to be mean here, but she just wasn't getting it, and it was in the script. And by the way, I never do anything differently than what's in my screenplays. When actors sign on for my movies, everything that we're going to do is in the script. I don't come up with things on the fly. Hey, let's do a scene where you swing a stick at somebody and they shoot you. And no, it was there. So when I don't know what was wrong with, what was the problem? She just couldn't get it. But then, like you said, in the editing, it could have been improved.
Yeah, it could have just been tightened a little bit. That's all. Exactly.
It could have been tightened. That's what should have happened. And yeah, I even noticed, this is getting really detailed, but I even noticed a sound effect that was like on a loop that kept looping even after she was like down on the ground.
Yes.
Boy, did that annoy me, it's like, dude, turn off the loop,
But to your, like what you had said before, it's just another symptom of this, we're just trying to crank a movie out real quick. So in editorial, they just kind of, I guess we're done. We can't really be bothered with fixing that.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And no, that scene should have been tightened. It could have been. We had the coverage. It just. And look, I wish that. At the end of the day, I guess I could say I wish it was better directed. But.
Oh, geez.
Well, no, I'll say that because you don't want to put all the. You can't just put all the blame on everybody all the time. But I will say that we tried hard to get her to do the action. We had probably 5 more scenes to shoot that night, and it was probably and we did it. And we got the coverage, but then in the editing, it was botched. It was just too fat. It was just allowed to just lay there. I do like the moment where she blows her own brains out. I kind of thought that came across pretty well. But prior to that, because it's kind of shocking, but prior to that, yeah, the scene with the stick, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. I will also say, since I'm talking about the editing so much here, and this might be a first for a witchcraft movie because they're usually padded, beyond belief. There were scenes I shot that are not in the movie. There literally could be deleted scenes. Like if you did a deluxe edition of this, which I don't think that's going to happen, but there were scenes that we shot that were not in the movie, and one of them was even a sex scene that was not in the film. Yeah, I did a scene between Janet, the lead actress, and Chip, Will Spanner. It was actually like a very naturalistic sex scene. It wasn't like this bump and grind, lighting and all this kind of stuff. It was actually very realistically done, handheld, and of course, probably was too naturalistic for Jerry, so he just cut the scene out. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. Like Jerry Pfeiffer cut a sex scene out of a movie. That's
of all the things.
Yeah, of all the things. And then there was another scene that more of an exposition, and it was with a girl that it was a detective, kind of questioning a witness and. It was actually a cool little scene. Once again, it was kind of like if you've ever seen To Live and Die in L.A., which is one of my favorite movies of all time. It was kind of like one of those scenes in that where where William Peterson is questioning somebody, or it was just a cool little edgy character thing. And this is a witchcraft movie. We don't need that, so they cut that out. So I have a few deleted scenes there too. Which is kind of. I think it's probably unusual in the history of the films because usually they're stretched out. They usually are padding the footage, and they had plenty of time to pad that footage in the club. It's from 1992, but they didn't with a girl spraying whipped cream on her boobs, but they didn't want the scenes that actually advance the story or the character.
Sure. Well, that's a lot of the problem with any of those films is the fact that it's hard to get into the story of any of these films because they have to have a sex scene every 5 to 10 minutes that grinds that story to a halt.
It's so hard to write that because you keep trying to motivate it. I think if you think about Witchcraft for me as a writer, I was thinking, well, okay, there's going to be a cult of girls who are seducing these guys, and then they're vulnerable, and then they get killed by the killer. So okay, that provides a bunch of sex scenes, and then you think about the lead girl, and maybe there could be a romance between her and Will Spanner, so that provides your kind of like the rest of them. But it's still awkward. Sometimes
right.
It's very awkward to in the flow of the script and the flow of the film.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's kind of, if you were to take it back to how the old 50s and 60s exploitation films were, or like Herschel Gordon Lewis's movies where they were barely over 60 to 70 minutes. I think these films would have been perfect like that.
I agree with you. And I did a movie called Demon's Kiss. I directed this movie called Demon's Kiss that was kind of like my take on Cat People. And it came out a lot better. And actually when the movie was released in the U.S., so they had to get an R rating, and some of the sex scenes were trimmed for the R-rated release, which was like the commercial release of the movie. I was thrilled because that means the pace of the movie is actually going to hold up. I mean, you're still going to have the sex scenes and the nudity, which frankly, okay, I know people who rent it, they want to see that and it's there, but it's not as long. It's like maybe cut by half or something per scene. And I think that Witchcraft would have, or maybe all of them, I don't know, would have benefited from that type of judicious trimming. Because the whole movie would move along, and sometimes I'm watching these scenes and I go, they're like using every second of footage we shot. they're almost using like the dailies. I mean, like it's so much footage. You know what I mean? It keeps going and going, and you're like, I don't know, but whatever. I'm not, I know the idea behind these. I know the purpose of them. When you sit down to write a film, if any kind of seriousness, you try to just make a good movie, and these things are kind of working against that sometimes. So.
Well, I got to be honest, Brad. Of the 12 movies, yours, Ron's, and there was one more that I thought they were actually very watchable and very well done. I mean, for what they were. I especially seeing how yours was mostly shot on video, which I think a lot of people that's a hard hurdle to cross. I've always been a shot on video fan from way back, so that never bothered me too much. But did you ever, after it came out, did you ever end up hearing any feedback here or there about the film?
I've read some online reviews. I never heard anybody that. And it seems like the people that liked it or didn't like it, it wasn't because of the format we shot on. I mean, they were more just judging it as a movie, But you're right. I mean, it is daunting, and well, not daunting. It's frankly irritating to go into a series, a franchise, and all of a sudden, a franchise that's been shot on, probably the first movie may have been shot on 35, for all I know, maybe some of the other ones too. And now you're shooting on Betacam. You feel like you're just going to be like judged as like the poor cousin of the poor relation franchise, and it's like, no, these are the same people that made all of these movies, or the same company anyway, and this is what they decided to do with my movie.
It's too bad because you had a lot of ambition behind you. Like for a shot on video film, you had a lot of locations, a lot of setups, the camera's constantly moving.
I was noticing that. I was like, this is kind of crazy. Like, because there's a lot of characters, there's a lot of locations, there's night exteriors, there's a lot of supporting characters, these girls and the guys that they kill and other characters that pop in and out, and it has somewhat of a pace. I mean, the scenes are fairly short, from one scene to another, and I mean, I tried, and I don't know if you'll recognize this shot or not, but there's a shot where the two guys are meeting up, the detective and Will are meeting up to like do he's giving him a headphone. He's giving him like a hidden microphone. And we shot that. Actually, we shot it in Vista Street's parking lot. They were on like the second floor of this office building, and there was like a ramp that went up to this parking lot that actually overlooked one of the freeways here. Probably maybe the 4 or 5 or the 10, I don't know. But it was nighttime. I remember when we filmed that, I was looking at it, and just the two guys standing there, and I'm like, this kind of exemplifies what I'm trying to do with this movie, at least in terms of the style. It's like, the freeway in the back, and there's kind of like a nice depth of field, and the cars are going by in the background all like, out of focus, and they're standing there. And I remember when we filmed that scene, I told the DP, I said, let it play long. I'm going to get close-ups for your sound, but they're not going to be usable as close-ups because I don't want close-ups in this.
Right, you're just going to get wild.
You're just going to get wild track. Yeah, literally. You will not be able to use these close-ups. I intentionally did that because I knew that if I didn't, this is going to go back to like John Ford time, but, I knew that if I didn't, do it that way, that they would just cut to the close-ups. They'd just ruin it. Yeah. So I'm very proud of that shot, and I think it kind of exemplifies what I was trying to do with the movie for the whole time, and maybe that didn't come through all the time. In that moment, it did.
Well, it definitely. I noticed it right away. Like
I shoot a lot of coverage. I mean, and I probably because I will tell you right now, we shot the movie in 6 days. Probably for that type of schedule, I was shooting. I was overshooting or whatever, but. I think I learned by that point, like I said, I'd done a few movies for Vista Street, and Jerry was always very intent on getting the coverage for the sex scenes, and I'm like, okay, and I did that, but I was like, I'm going to get the coverage for the sex scenes, but I'm also going to get the coverage for everything else, and, give this movie some, and I tried to do some handheld stuff, which is actually not easy with a Betacam. It's kind of clunky and awkward and for certain scenes, and, we did some of the colored lighting and stuff like that. That's more the DP's thing. I didn't really, I would credit him with that. I wasn't really my idea.
There was a lot of blue in it.
Yeah, a lot of blue. I think we were probably just like, I'll tell you where we shot that movie. A lot of where we shot was in this rehearsal space, like where bands come to rehearse.
Sure.
And I've shot a couple of movies in the same location, and trying to do what you can, with set dressing and lighting and everything to make it more interesting. So we just, the colored gels and all that kind of stuff. I mean, one of the walls was actually red, which was kind of cool. So that sort of provided its own color. But then we did bring a lot of blue in, and there's some stuff I like in it. I mean, I'll be honest. There are, and I'm talking about the photography and there are some things I like in it. Yeah, we had 6 days to do that, so. That's
impressive. I mean, 6 days. I've been involved with a feature film that shot in 6 days, and those are some 20-hour days, and
These weren't 20-hour days. These were probably like 14-hour days. It was not a difficult shoot, actually. Like, it wasn't like we had any actors that were really difficult, or anything. Nothing like just went horribly wrong, or making the movie. But I think our hours were like probably around 14. That was sort of standard for what we were doing, because when you do 20-hour days, everyone just gets so tired, and then you also have to push the call, and then it's hard to maintain your production schedule when you keep doing that.
Right.
The last day you can do a 20-hour day if you realize a bunch of stuff that you have to get done. But and I've had movies like that too, but this one was more. It was actually pretty controlled, and I don't remember going back to do any like additional photography or second unit or anything like that. We did it all in 6 days.
That's pretty impressive.
Well, I had done a few of them. I had done a few by that point. I mean, I'd done movies on film in those type of schedules, where obviously you have more crew, you have more things to deal with changing the mags and loading the film and rack focusing and dolly, all this stuff you deal with film, and I'd done those in short schedules. So this wasn't terribly difficult for me, actually.
So I'm sure at that point you probably had a crew of guys that you were familiar with.
There were, I wish there was more crew than you. I mean, there was very few people on that set. I mean, it was me, the DP, who was also kind of doing all of his own lighting, and then maybe a PA or two. And we had an effects person who worked. They didn't work that much. I mean, they mainly did the makeup at the end with the creature, or the snake man. But no, I didn't have a whole ton of production support. It was a lot of, which is kind of par for the course with the movies I was doing for that particular producer at the time. I mean, you're really on your own, and you're bringing I mean, like I said, I had a person who is their credit as an associate producer, and they helped with a lot of the props and the set dressing and things like that, but I was wrangling a lot of things on that movie too,
I know how that is.
Just directing the movie, you think that would be enough, but with these type of movies, it's never enough.
So I have one last question, and it's kind of getting back to more of like something that happened in the film. So Will Spanner has these powers, but he drinks a potion in order to have some clairvoyance or a psychic ability. What is he exactly drinking?
Wouldn't you like to know? No, you know what? I don't know. I mean, I don't or at least I don't know now in 2014,
Right.
I mean, maybe I had some kind of an idea about it back then, but I don't know. I think I was just trying to, I think with that scene, what I was trying to do was just show that this guy, I think it was the first time you see him doing anything like that. Before you see him shooting lightning bolts out of his hands or any of that stuff. By the way, that was the first movie I ever did where I dealt with visual effects. And so it's kind of funny, to shoot some of these scenes without, obviously without the effect supply, with people tumbling through, they kind of have to force themselves to tumble through doorways and things like that. And it looks ridiculous when you're shooting it. and then later on the effects were put in and all that. But the potion that he drinks, I don't know. I think I still have that bottle though. I have the snake necklace too that the girls are wearing. In fact, you'll find this funny. There's I think 4 or 5 girls in the movie. They're all wearing this necklace. Well, guess what? There was only one necklace. You're never going to see 2 girls in the shot wearing the necklace because we only had one. But I kept it at the end of I found that in a store on Hollywood Boulevard, just some thrift store or something, and it was this is perfect, and I painted the flag myself too. The flag that you see, it's like a serpent flag. I painted that on the floor of the garage in my building. I did that. So that's the kind of thing I was doing on the movie. I wasn't just directing it. I was shopping for props and painting flags and stuff like. But I have to say I kind of enjoy that on some level. It's kind of you feel like you're putting more of yourself into the movie. So anyway, I don't mind doing that stuff. It's kind of fun. It's kind of a good feeling when you're doing it. I mean, I like working with department heads too, but I think I tend to enjoy stuff like that. So yeah, but I couldn't tell you what was in that bottle. I only Will Spanner knows, I guess.
Well, I suppose we could leave it up to him, or do we want to come up with what that possibly could be that he's drinking?
I think people should submit to your website or something. They should submit answers, guesses to that. I like to see how many people have seen the movie too, because I don't know how many people have seen it. It wasn't distributed as well as it should have been, given that it's part of a franchise that's going since 1989.
Well, you know what, Brad? I think that it's been included in a lot of these Echo Bridge $5 20 film packs.
Right. It's in a pack. I have one pack here that I got in, I don't know when I got it, maybe 5 years ago, that I think Mill Creek or Echo Bridge or somebody put out that had it. They had that and another one of my films too. Actually, it was I think I had 2 movies I did for Vista Street were in this pack called Witches and Demons or something like that. And look, you know what? If more people see it probably that is how people are going to see it. Honestly, it's great. I don't mind these multi-pack things sometimes because they lump all these things together and then people pick them up and Kmart or whatever, and it gives them a chance to see the movie. So anyway, I buy those things. I mean, in fact, sometimes I'll pick them up for the other, I see what movies. Oh, it's got this, and this, and then I'll go to the cash register and realize it's got one of my own movies in it too. I didn't even know till I looked at the whole thing, and there are 20 movies in there. But it's. Whatever gets in front of people. I
suppose. What I'm shocked by is that they haven't put together all these Witchcraft films on one of those things.
Well, it's funny. Fangoria. Okay, I'll tell you why. I'm sure there's rights issues. I mean, I remember Fangoria wrote a 1-page article about the Witchcraft. And of course, they were slamming them, but they were making a joke at the end, maybe till then we'll wait till the box set comes out. Well, that ain't ever going to happen. I mean, those movies, maybe they're technically all owned by Vista Street, by Jerry Pfeiffer, but they've been licensed to so many different companies. I mean, I know Troma has some of them, and some of the other ones. I know he still holds on. He still retains probably the last 3 or 4. And then the last one they did, the 13 or whatever, that came out through York or somebody else put that out. So let's just put it this way: between all those movies, they are scattered among many distributors, and who knows what deals these people, what ownership these people have, and Jerry wouldn't, he's the kind of person that he probably wouldn't care, even if he could easily get all the rights back somehow, say they were just contracts expired with all these different companies or whatever, he still wouldn't bother to do something like that, any more than he would bother to do extras on a DVD. I had 4 movies released by him, and I was never asked to do a commentary or provide any kind of extras for any of them. So, these films are not really, and I don't think Ron was either on Part 11 for that matter. I think that they're just they just put them out on DVD, and you're not, as a director, you're not really part of that process. You find out about it later on, and
That's too bad. Well, let's go ahead and put that behind us, Brad, and let's go ahead.
I have. In fact, I think you're the first person who's talked to me really exclusively about that movie. I mean, I've done interviews before, and it's probably come up in interviews, but I have never talked about it in depth this way with anybody. you're the first person to ask me all these questions about the movies.
Welcome back. I hope you guys really dug that one because it was actually an almost 3-hour interview that I cut up just so we could keep the focus of this episode on the Witchcraft series. So tune in on a future episode of Astro Radio Z so you can hear the rest of that interview where Brad and I discuss his new shot-on-video horror anthology, High 8. You know, if you're an Astro Radio Z listener, how excited I am for that film. So please stick around and tune in on a future episode of Astro Radio Z for more Brad Sykes talking about High 8. Another thing I wanted to talk about is I wanted to thank you guys for the overwhelming positive feedback on the D&T episode. It was something that Tam and I thought was really fun, and you guys obviously felt the same way. So you asked for it. You're going to get more D&T in the next few weeks. So I hope you guys are ready for what you requested because we got a doozy of one coming up in the future. But of course, look out for the Brad Sykes interview coming up and then the final Witchcraft episode. So from Derrick Carey and Astro Radio Z, see you next time.